Yeah, start looking at that. Pass that on around folks to see that.
You want to sit down? I'll wait.
Billy is back from vacation. Originally, Billy was not going to be here. He went on vacation, but he said the weather was bad and all, so he came back early, and glad to have him back. I was prepared to bear colors tonight and also present the program. Looking forward to it. I've got a few announcements I'd like to make before we get to the program. And let's see. First off, if you were not in Cumberland County on Friday night, you missed a good one. It went fantastic. We had a great time celebrating the 250th anniversary of the county. And we've been at this committee for about a year and a half. And we had all this great weather. And we woke up Friday morning and rain and all. I was almost despondent about it. But I just made up my mind, well, we're just going to do the best we can, and we'll move inside. And whatever happens, happens. And this will pass. And we'll get over it. It'll be all right. It was fantastic. It just went great. It flowed smooth. Channel 12 was there. They gave good coverage to it. I didn't get to see it. Several people told me they saw it and it looked pretty good. And anyway, it was really nice. There are some leftover programs on the table over there. If you want one, you're welcome to take home. That will list all the activities and things that happened, and you're welcome to use that as a keepsake of the event. I'd like to recognize a few people at this point. Barry Detweiler. Where's Barry? Barry? I'll wait on Barry for a minute. I'd like to recognize my mom and Herman Thomas are here tonight. And thanks. Hopefully make you proud. There's a fellow down in Keysville by the name of Barry Detweiler. He'll be back in just a moment. Who's moved down here. He's a Yankee, moved down here, realized this is the place to be, and he started a new newspaper called the Country Chronicle. It's trying to get a circulation from Danville to Emporia, up to Farmville, and probably going to be south of the James River before too long. He'll have a bundle of these tonight as samples for you to take home. And it's a nice paper all over Southside Virginia, all kind of ads. I'm going to be doing a historical column for him every month, and in exchange he'll give me an ad. So hopefully I can get the word out about my products and goods as well as spreading the word on Southside Virginia history. So Barry will be here in just a moment, and I'd like to recognize him. Also, this weekend I was in Culpeper, Virginia on Sunday. They had their 250th anniversary of the county. It was outside on the football field behind the high school, just like we had planned. And you know something, I think we probably had the right thing in that when you're outside, first off, you're at the mercy of the weather. It was windy. You can't really hear that well. You got all sorts of distractions with kids and all running around. So when we moved inside, you eliminate all that. You can hear, plus you got chairs, people sitting down. So I really think it worked pretty good for us. And I tell you, for a county that has a population 5 times that of Cumberland, they really didn't have that many more people than we did Friday night. So that added to my elation about the event as well. I brought back a few things from up there, some things being handed out there, touting the largest reenactment in the state of Virginia is supposed to happen next month, Brandy Station, Virginia, June 18, 19, and 20. They're going to reenact the Battle of Yellow Tavern, Saunders Field, the Mule Shoe, Battalion Drill, Laurel Hill, the Cavalry Drill, Todd's Cavern, then the Battle of Coal Harbor. This is going to be a humdinger. And if you're interested in this, there's a few of the flyers I left back over there as well. And also the Culpeper Historical Society is going to have a battlefield tour of Brandy Station. And if you're interested in that, by all means, take one of those with you as well. Barry, could you stand up, please? This is Barry Detweiler, publisher of the Country Chronicle. He's moved down here and is starting a new newspaper, and he'll have some right there with him. Please get one from him. I think you'll enjoy it. Barry, did you want to say anything in particular about the paper? What is your mission?
It's a paper that I started last August. I was doing papers for over 15 years up north, and I came down here originally to teach in college. I didn't get a contract renewal for the fall, so I decided to start up my paper again. And this time I named it Country Chronicle. It's still a continuation of the same corporation, although I registered in Virginia, the local paper incorporated. We have historical articles in every issue. Bob Flippen contributes an article in each issue, has for the past several issues. It comes out 10 times a year. It's distributed throughout Southside, recently into Farmville. And
we're on the fast track now. We're still $1,000 shy of what we need. We got enough to get it to the printer. We don't have quite enough to get it from the printer. So what we decided to do is have a little prepaid sale here, good till the end of this month. The retail price has been determined to be $19.95. Jimmy Wooten here from Buckingham County, fellow member of the Richmond Area Bottle Collectors Association, has the mock-up of the catalog, or the book, excuse me, right now.
Sure.
It's not totally complete. It's about 99 and 44/100%. I'd like for you to look at it. I've got a couple of sign-up sheets here. If you are interested in getting this in on this at a prepaid rate of $14.95 a copy, please sign up on this. They will just invoice you. You don't have to give me any money. I don't want it. They will invoice you for it. And if you get an invoice, please send it in, pretty quick. Don't throw it in the pile with the regular bills, the next week or something. But send it in, because we really need the money. It won't be like $20, or less than that. And if you look for Christmas gifts, this would be a good time. For those of you who have donated or subscribed to the effort, this would be a chance maybe to get a few extra copies at a cheaper price now. Or you will certainly be getting your free copy once the books come out. The targeted pickup date is July 1st, but maybe expect it to be a little bit later than that, actually. But we'll have it this summer. We're going to make our deadline. And Richard McClintock, Richard's not here tonight, but I want to commend him because he has put in hundreds of hours on this. And when you look at that, that's his page layout. Those are all our artifacts and relics that future generations are going to see and admire. And it's just chronicles our town and our history, and I think it's great. I'll just pass these around here. If you're interested, sign up. If not, that's fine. Just keep passing. Let's see. In other publications, Volume 2 of Historical Notes on Buckingham is, indexed up to page 200 now. Got 177 more pages to go. I hope to have that ready for Buckingham's annual meeting in September. Now, don't let the title fool you, just because it's primarily about Buckingham. It's loaded with Farmville as well. Because remember, it's the Farmville paper reporting it, and it's all kind of people coming into town. You'd be surprised how many people from Buckingham ran these stores downtown here. And then they're going home on weekends with their family, and just the trip into town will be recounted in it, how the telephones are coming into being, and public roads are getting much better. So this volume is going to be quite excellent as well. The Herald supplement, moving right along. I got less than 10 years now, about 6 or 7 more years to go. Just finished 1955 this week. I'm coming backwards now, 98 to 48, so it'll be 51 years total. And so 54, I'll do this 54 to 48. We'll cover like the 150th anniversary and all the events right on up to our bicentennial. This is just a small, kind of abridged mini mock-up that I've done just to keep track of what I've done so far, but it's going to be in a newspaper format. It'll be the size of a newspaper. I'll pass this around. You're welcome to look at this as well. Okay, I think that's it. Oh, one other thing. I do have some of my own catalogs around the table in case you haven't gotten one. Please take one home. All right, let's get started. I've been looking forward to this. I finished my notes about 5 o'clock this afternoon, and I'm looking forward to this. Tonight's lecture is entitled Liquor, Temperance, and the Farmville Dispensary. Liquor sales and the temperance movement led to one of the most controversial political contests ever waged in Farmville, up until we had a school problem in the 1950s. In the 1890s, saloon keepers were under scrutiny to somehow decrease public drunkenness in the town streets. In 1893, numerous restrictions, including a license fee of $500, was imposed on liquor dealers in an attempt to keep the sale of intoxicants limited to fewer and more reputable dealers. Some of these dealers include J.L. Richardson. He was born in 1851 in Appomattox County, died in 1921. Came to Farmville at the tender age of 14, and he worked in the store of his half-brother, B.S. Hooper. Who knows who B.S. Hooper was? Benjamin Stephen Hooper. He was elected a congressman from our town under the readjuster ticket in 1883 to 1885. He operated a store, dry goods store, right about where Motley Hardware is. The front of it was dry goods, the back was liquor, and the downstairs back basement was a grocery store. He bought the store, or the business, after the death of Benjamin Stever and became partners with his brother-in-law, R.B. Crawley, forming the dry goods establishment of Richardson and Crawley. He became the liquor buyer for the Farmville Dispensary later for the entire duration of its existence. Here is a billhead for Richardson and Crawley here, and this is a fragment of a crock found out in the Appomattox River. Great curvature, about the size of it, I'd say it's probably going to be about a 1 gallon. And you can barely make out a half of an O, a P, and an E, and an R. E's, I-E-S, and liquors, and an A, I'm sure, for Virginia. I'm pretty sure this is going to be one of Benjamin Stephen Hooper's, B.S. Hooper's crocks. I know he had crocks because I've seen a half-gallon storage jar of his marked B.S. Hooper Groceries and Liquors, Farmville, Virginia. So I'm pretty sure that's going to be one of his. That is what I call a barn burner if you ever find one of these. That's going to be rare. Richardson advertised in the Farmville Herald right frequently, and he had a brand of beer that he touted, that he added his name to. I'm sure it was a franchise beverage, but he had a little poem printed in the Farmville Herald about it. It's entitled "Drink the Best." 4 verses here. I'd like to read it to you. It's kind of a hoot. If you the finest beer on earth desire, Bohemian export you had best inquire. Unrivaled it stands without a peer, Richardson's Bohemian export beer. Of choice hops and malts beer is made, a Philadelphia product of highest grade. Always sparkling, fresh and clear, Richardson's Bohemian export beer. By Jim Richardson this beer is controlled. On its merits purity alone it is sold. He sells by glass, bottle, and case, far and near, Richardson's Bohemian export beer. In the leading resort, bear in mind, Richardson's Bohemian export you'll find. 'Twill the sad rejoice, the downcast cheer, Richardson's Bohemian export beer. To Jim Richardson your orders send. On his fine goods you can always depend. In the morning a big head, never fear. Drink Bohemian export beer. There was a fire at his establishment on March 30th, 1894, late that night. The Herald says Richardson's business was located in the rear of H.V. Baldwin's dry goods store. And from the article, right here, we'll get a few more details. It's late at night, March 30th, 1894. The fire is supposed by some to have been occasioned by a hot coal falling from the stove after the saloon had been closed, while others expressed the opinion that it was of an incendiary origin. The former theory, however, is probably the correct one, as it is that a hot fire was in the stove when the building was left for the night. It was seriously apprehended that when the whiskey barrels exploded and their contents scattered in seething sheets of flame, that the adjoining buildings would be destroyed. But luckily, the heroic efforts of Farmville's daring firemen, aided by the favorable southern breeze, that's the only thing that saved that whole block of buildings, probably, which carried the burning embers over a vacant lot adjoining the railroad, saved the nearby structures. So imminent was the danger of the storehouses of H.V. Baldwin and W.E. England that their goods were hurriedly taken to the street and guards placed over them for protection from thieves. Their damage from rough handling and general exposure is necessarily very great. Richardson and Company's entire stock was totally destroyed. They talked about this fire like this was a really bad fire, and it was. And the mayor called Lynchburg, wired them to ask for the Lynchburg Fire Department to come to us because they had some kind of pumper on a railroad car and they could come here and help. But our people got it under control and they wired back and told not to come. This is not unlike what's going to happen on the night of January 2nd, 1898, when the big fire happens over here at the Lumpkin Factory at the corner of North and 3rd. Robert, was that your building, the Lumpkin Factory? Was that where it was?
I do not know.
Okay, it was somewhere on the corner of North and 3rd, and we lost over 30 buildings due to that fire. But anyway, that was a humdinger.
It burned all the way up, including the hurl building. We dug a foot to the hurl, ran into all these ashes, brick foundation.
They said it was storerooms at Duval and Robertson or something nearby, and that whole kegs of gunpowder, that was the problem, was going off, and it was just raining fire all over the town. All right. Hugh O'Gara and F.G. Byrne purchased the stock of whiskey, wines, etc. of J.L. Richardson about August of 1898 and continued the business from which Richardson had retired. Mr. Byrne was a merchant from Lowmore, Virginia, and did not reside in Farmville. Where is Lowmore?
Up at Covington?
Gold Star.
Huh?
Yes, Gold Star to you, yes sir. Right off I-64.
I used to live up there.
Oh, no kidding. The business was managed here by Hugh O'Gara, who was from Covington, and highly recommended as a pleasant, agreeable, and sober gentleman who will make many and lasting friends. Mr. W.A. Stone, who was with Richardson for years, was retained by O'Gara for his services. I guess maybe he was a bartender. While in Farmville, O'Gara became smitten with one of our lovely ladies, Mrs. Sally W. Hooper. They exchanged nuptials on June 26, 1901, at the home of the bride, and honeymooned on a trip through the north. By August of 1903, O'Gara has apparently returned to Covington, Virginia, probably due to the impending dispensary question here in town. The town council's real fuddy-duddy for about 3 years. And we know this because the ads in the Herald note his address suddenly as being Covington. Remember, back then, you could sell liquor through the mail. So it was, when it got dry, they would just put an ad in the paper. Well, I'd say it was dry, I'm sure it was illegal then. But with the question of whether they're going to have a dispensary or not, they kept back and forth with it. So he just went on back to Covington, I think, and sold liquor through the mail. One of O'Gara's pint bottles was found in the chimney of the old Planters Bank, mortared to the brick with a cork intact during demolition of the old Planters Bank, replaced by the new Fidelity Bank building, now the Wachovia Bank, in 1975. I think Roger Hill over in Buckingham has that bottle. Brands sold by O'Gara included Cooper's Old Corn Whiskey. That's like this with the man here. Dispensary carried that later on. Braddock Rye, Stewart Rye, Maryland Quadruple X Rye, the famous Pabst Milwaukee beer. Apparently they haven't won their gold medal yet. And O'Gara's Private Stock, touted as famous because of its smooth, exquisite flavor and matchless purity. So O'Gara is around for about 5 years, it looks like, not quite that long. And so you can use that to kind of date the time period that his bottles would be here in town. The next dealer is C.C. Jackson. I don't know what his name is. Does anybody? Is he Charles Cooper Jackson? Was he related to W.W. Jackson, to P.H. Jackson? I just don't know if he was from here or an imported Jackson from elsewhere. I know very little about him and his biography, but he certainly was one of Farmville's leading liquor dealers. He was in a partnership with Joseph Manoni. This is critical. Please note the bottles. His bottles are these beautiful aqua bottles right there. The bottles are they have liquor dealers, plural on it, because he's in a partnership with Manoni. Note the other people have liquor dealer, singular, on their bottles. He had an ad in the Herald in June of 1893 which alluded to the high license fee recently imposed on the town's liquor dealers. And it reads that we take this method of informing our friends and the public generally that we are still in the ring, regardless of high license, with a full and complete stock of whiskeys, brandies, wines, gin, rum, ale, porter, beers, tobacco, and cigars, and in fact everything kept in a first-class saloon. Below we beg to give some of our leading brands of whiskey. We're the sole agents for Paul Jones, Bell of Nelson, Kentucky whiskeys, North Carolina corn whiskey is a specialty. Other brands too numerous to mention. Beer on draft, mint juleps raging under the new law. There's got to be something about that I figure out, but I just don't know what it is. We are determined to buy and sell strictly for cash, giving those who favor us with their patronage the advantage of the discounts. From the September 2nd, 1893 Farmville Herald, we see there's a mention saying that the very best beer ever offered on the Farmville market is the brand Proteweiner of the Louis Bergdahl Brewing Company. This beer is on sale at C.C. Jackson & Company's and should be given a trial by all who indulge. From February 10, 1894, C.C. Jackson & Company donated 1 case of Paul Jones whiskey for the fair. June 9, 1894, a mention stating new corn whiskey at Jackson's for $1.50 a gallon. That's a pretty good price. June 23rd, by today's standards, certainly. June 23rd, 1894. This instances of that little social gathering. Messieurs C.C. Jackson and Company served to their friends and the public generally turtle soup Monday. It was prepared by Mr. W.H. Berger Sr., and rarely have we seen a dish more enjoyed. That must have been nice. From August 14, 1896, the condition of the cellar under the store of Messieurs C.C. Jackson and Company was referred to the street committee. Apparently it was in a sad state of disrepair or something. I don't know where his stand or shop was. On February 5th, 1897, an ad appeared in the Farmville Herald announcing the dissolution of the partnership, and it read as follows: Dissolution. By mutual consent, C.C. Jackson and Joseph Mononi, doing business in the town of Farmville under the firm name of C.C. Jackson and Company, have this day dissolved partnership, Joseph Mononi assuming entire control of the business. All parties indebted to the late firm of C.C. Jackson and Company will please come forward and settle at once. All accounts not settled before March 1st, 1897 will be put in the hands of an officer for collection. This is dated January 29, 1897. So what can we deduce from that in our archaeological minds about C.C. Jackson bottles? You know it is before?
Before 1897.
Thank you very much. Exactly. So that's one way you can use to date those bottles. We know that now. So that also means then that the Joseph Mononi bottle is
1897 around.
Thank you, Jenny. Now, I'm told that the reason for this dissolution was that Jackson had a religious conversion, and his occupation as a liquor merchant, well, was just not conducive to one who has been born again. But by July of 1897, Jackson was back in business. Not as a liquor dealer. In a minute, you can... July 9, 1897, another new store will be opened up on this place on the 15th. Mr. C.C. Jackson will open a book and confectionery business in the storeroom opposite Crute's Drug Store and next to Fleming and Clark's. We bespeak for Mr. Jackson a liberal share of the public patronage. He is energetic and attentive to business, and if success is not obtained, it will not be of any fault of his. Unfortunately, by December of 1898, the doors of his business, operating under the name of N.A. Jackson, go figure, were closed. It was a shock to the people of Farmville to learn that he was in such a dire financial condition. Judge Watkins was named trustee of the matter, and the man's stock was sold to compensate creditors. The last mention I see of Jackson in the Herald was in 1903, when an article of the Farmville Dispensary's anticipated opening noted that it was to open April 15 of that year, with C.C. Jackson as the whiskey salesman, and C.H. Bliss's old stand as the place. This did not happen apparently, as there was some question of legality involved, in that one of the dispensary's board members' term had expired, it hadn't been refilled, and it was questioned as or believed that it was not appropriate for business to be conducted without a full board. This was a real sticky matter at that time. Well, that leads us right up to Joseph Mononi, probably Farmville's most colorful liquor dealer. He was from Ursa on the French island of Corsica in the Mediterranean. Though a naturalized citizen of the United States, Mononi would often return to visit his mother. On one such visit in 1896, he encountered some difficulty with the French government. He describes what happened in a letter to his partner, C.C. Jackson, because they're still in business at that time, dated August 26, 1896, and it was published in the September 18 issue of the Herald. He says, I left Monday for Rome, Italy, and went about 35 miles from home in the city in the port where I was to board the steamer for Italy. I was taken in by the gendarme and kept as a deserter from France. Consequently, I had to give a big security bond and wait here until my trial, which I shall try and have pushed through next week, which is the last term of court. At that time, the court will take a recess for 2 months, and I therefore hope very much to come out all right next week. I passed several days in sorrow and trouble, and many times I've thought hard of America for giving to men passports and naturalization papers, promising them that they will protect them, and many times also I have cursed France for being so strict as they are. I have had many happy and pleasant days since I left Farmville, but the trouble which has come upon me in the last few days overbalances the good times. I don't know yet when I'll be allowed to leave Corsica, not until my case is decided. The article also states a letter was forwarded to Secretary of State Olin from his friends here demanding an investigation into his detention. By October 5th of 1896, a letter from Mr. Mononi arrived dated September 21, announcing his release by French authorities. On December 2nd, 1896, a banquet was held for Mononi, who had just recently returned, probably at the Randolph House. Remember, it's not the Prince Edward Hotel until 1907. He was called upon for a speech and made the following remarks. This is very eloquent. I guess first I need to explain the reason he was taken into custody was he was accused of being a draft dodger. At the age of 18 in France at that time, apparently he was supposed to serve 5 years in the military. However, he had left France before that age, became naturalized, and apparently they didn't believe him at the time when they took him, but apparently it was proven that he was an American citizen indeed. All right, he's at the Randolph House. He's being welcomed back by all his friends, and he says, "This is indeed, my dear friends, an entirely unexpected welcome. But its being a surprise makes me nonetheless appreciative of your kindly and generous greeting. The manner in which I have been received back to my adopted home, which I so much love, has thrilled my heart, and being with emotions of tenderest affection and words at my command are entirely inadequate to express the obligation I fain would acknowledge. I have long known the pleasures of friendships formed in Farmville, and shall ever cherish them as among the most valued acquirements of my life. But tonight you have made me to feel a sincere pride by the manifested interest you have for my happiness among you. I count not myself the most worthy among you of such unstinted honors, yet I promise in token of my appreciation that unchanging loyalty of purpose in all our social and business relations, as I have endeavored should characterize me since our happy acquaintance. I thank you again most heartily for what you have all done, and may we all live long and enjoy many more happy returns." Now, this was a small gathering, apparently. There was Dr. W.E. Anderson responded to Mononi's speech in a happy vein, welcoming him home again in our midst. And I think he was particularly fond to be back. And I think Dr. W.E. Anderson, like he was a drinking man. And among the gentlemen present were Captain J.R. Martin, Messrs. E.L. Morris, A.A. Amandus Cox, he ran the livery stable down here with Jerry Stewart at 4th Street, E.D. Lee, who's also a liquor dealer later on, H.W. Walker, and J.L. Hart of the Herald. Robert, could you tell us the story about W.E. Anderson? You told me one time about drinking liquor, something, going out hunting or something up on the horse.
Mr. Baldwin told me this story.
Or one of these.
He said that he and Dr. Anderson went hunting one day and they rode horseback. And when they left town, ridden over the country and started hunting for the dog food, that Dr. Anderson stopped by a spring, and right below the spring was a little sandbar. And he said, "Frank, you want a little drink before we start?" Oh, didn't tell me whether or not it's acceptable. But anyway, Dr. Anderson, after offering it to Mr. Ball, turned it down up and drank about a third of it, corked it, put it in his pocket. Tasted a little spring water. And when he got back at lunch, he came on back by the same spring to have lunch. You can travel a lot of ground on a horse, as you would do with a walk. And they got down there, and Dr. Anderson pulled it out of him, turned it up and killed it, dropped it onto the sandbar. Mr. Baldwin said, after they had lunch, Dr. Anderson said, "Frank, would you like a little drink before we start hunting again?" "Oh, thank you, Doctor." So he pulled a new pipe from his saddlebag, and he cut that down for the third. So when they got back at night, they came by the same spring, because that's where they had left the wagon or whatever they were riding, and said, "Frank, would you like a little drink to finish this day over?" Well, thank you, Doctor. Doctor turned it up and killed that second pipe and dropped it right beside Mr. Ball and said, all my life I could see those 2 pints laying on that second."
He was glad to see Joseph Mononi come home.
And he said you could not tell that the man had a drink that didn't affect his hunting or shooting at all.
Isn't that amazing? Despite his prior difficulties, Mononi returned to Corsica for a visit in 1900. For about 6 funds, and again in 1908. The Richmond Dispatch published an article about one of Manoni's exploits while in Marseille shortly after the re-election of William McKinley. It was reprinted in the February 8, 1901 issue of the Herald. This is a hoot. Originally published in the Richmond Dispatch. Mr. Joseph Manoni, a well-to-do citizen of Farmville, is in the city telling his friends of a unique experience he recently had in Marseille. He had just returned from Europe, where he spent 7 months sightseeing and visiting his old home in France. The day after the late national election in this country, Mr. Manoni was in Marseille. He was very much interested in the great contest in the United States, and the first thing he did after getting up was to have himself into, or take himself into, a fashionable French restaurant, the Café de la Bourrée. Now Manoni is a big, fine-looking fellow, clean-shaven and with an aquiline nose that bespeaks character and intelligence. The first thing he did after being seated at a table was to order a morning paper in order to ascertain the result of the election. As he opened the sheet, he saw on the first page a 2-column picture of McKinley and headlines announcing the re-election of the president. The waiter stood close at hand. After a cursory glance, Manoni laid the paper down and in his tongue said, "Well, I am satisfied. I see that my cousin Mac has been re-elected president of the United States." "You are a cousin of McKinley?" the attendant asked, manifesting considerable astonishment. "Oh yes," replied the Farmvillian, thinking he would carry this joke to a finish. After that, the waiter was exceedingly deferential to Mr. Manoni, and when he rushed off with his order, in subdued tones, he let everyone about him know that he was serving the cousin of the great McKinley. Returning with the breakfast, the waiter began a conversation with the American concerning general conditions over here. Mr. Manoni told him that everything and everybody in the United States were flourishing under his cousin's administration, and that the people were happy and contented. "Everybody has plenty of money," the gentleman from Farmville declared, to the great surprise of the waiter. By this time, people were staring at Manoni from all parts of the cafe, and a score of waiters were huddled together, watching his every movement. The man at his table was overwhelming in his attention to his guest. "Yes," said Manoni, leaning back in his chair with the air of a millionaire. "When I want money, I simply go to my cousin Mac and say, 'Cousin Mac, please give me 150 feet of money.' And the president steps into a vault and measures it off to me." "What?" cried the amazed servant. "Certainly," Manoni asserted, assuringly, as he opened a pocketbook and took out about 2 feet of $10 bills that had not been clipped apart since being received at the bank which issued them. "This is the way it comes." This proved too much for the onlookers, who rushed to Manoni's table to see the wonderful sheet of money. "I enjoyed the experience," Manoni said yesterday, after telling the story, "but I had to tip the waiter about 4 times as heavily by reason of playing the role of the cousin of McKinley." That was great. Now, in regards to Manoni's bottles, he's right here. This general vicinity right here. Those with the registered embossed on the shoulder probably post-date those that do not. Jackson's don't have it on the shoulder, so Manoni probably kept on with it at the shoulder. But right about the turn of the century, you're having problems with short measures. People are accusing liquor dealers, they may be disreputable, it may just be people wronged, it may be the glass company making a pint flask that only held 15 ounces, let's say. There was concern that some dealers were shorting the consumer with a smaller measure than what was represented. A 1901 ad from Manoni in the Herald alluded to this problem, entitled "Goo Goo Eye at Joseph Manoni," because he uses full registered bottles. No short measure in bottles in letters followed. It says that because he uses full registered bottles, so that's probably when we'll start getting this on the shoulder. Published, registered, or warranted on the shoulder. He also handles the pure Old Virginia Mountain Rye, a large stock of Cooper's Old Corn, all kinds of whiskeys, imported liquors, tobacco, cigars, ale, and porter, the celebrated Anheuser-Busch beer of St. Louis, always on draft and in bottles. Stop little and give me a trial. Joseph Manoni. And the ad says that his stand is located opposite of White & Company's drugstore on Main Street. C.H. Bliss. An ad in the August 10, 1900 issue proclaims a new saloon with C.H. Bliss, proprietor, too. So, I mean, I'd be 98 years old starting a saloon. Thought maybe it would be a junior, but he would probably be up in age too. Was it Clyde Bliss?
Clyde Bliss, and they came down after the Civil War. Truth matter was copycat. And they moved in here, bought a big farm up here. It's on the Fairground Road, and
My house.
White House. Yours, you live in that son? And Mr. Bliss built that house. It's not standing at that time. And
Maybe
he was
different chairs were
Republican. And in those days, whether you're Republican or Democrat controlled who was the postmaster. And every time the Democrats would win, one of the local Democrats would be postmaster. And Mr. Bliss was the Bliss family. For Republicans, one of the Blisses was always postmaster, the Republicans won. And I remember, I'm sure Betty does, but she won't admit it. But Mr. Clyde Bliss was either postmaster or he had a bag on his back, dragged up the street, delivering mail every morning.
Wow. Neat.
Next election, he might be back to the head man.
The ad continues to mention brands available at C.H. Bliss's stand as being the Premium Cabinet, Richmond Club, Pure Corn Whiskey, Admiral Schley Rye Whiskey, and Pabst Beer on Draft, Brandy Wine Cigars. Also notes full measures, no short ones. He claimed to have the best line of whiskeys ever seen in Farmville since the days of Richardson Brothers, located on Main Street, the east side. Mr. Henry Walthall of Prince Edward is with me and will be glad to see and serve his friends. Now, I see ads for Bliss until the opening of the dispensary, but once again, I've yet to see an embossed bottle marked C.H. Bliss, so he probably used paper labels on stock bottles. There are many others, as far as liquor dealers, too numerous to mention, whose tenures as liquor dealers were probably fleeting at best. The sale of liquor was not an inherent right of the citizens, rather it was an occupation. You must be licensed by the town or county to engage in. There were rules that were applied to regulate the sale of spirits so that an orderly transpiration of business could occur. In December 1895 court session for Prince Edward County, we find some clues as to what some of these rules were. The charge against E.B. Lee, he got his license in July of 1895, was that he sold liquor which was drunk at his store, and with only a retail license. He pled guilty, waiving the right of a jury, and was fined $100 by the court. So obviously, it's kind of like today, you have your ABC on and off. Apparently, like the grocery stores probably could sell liquor too, but you couldn't drink it on premises. That's probably reserved exclusively for the saloons themselves and perhaps restaurants as well. C.C. Jackson was indicted twice for selling liquor to minors. He was fined $10 in each case. J.L. Richardson pled guilty to the charge of selling liquor to minors and paid a fine of $10. H.M. Brightwell, who keeps a bar at Prospect, was also up for selling whiskey to minors. His case was continued to the next term. Like today, selling spirits to minors was considered a big no-no.
I'm real glad you mentioned that, because Max Watson is always kidding me about Prospect and everything. And his grandfather was Mr. H.M. Brightwell, as you just mentioned. By the way, it'd be a good place. I'll put you on to the
In the early 1890s, we see that the town council imposed an outrageously high liquor fee, a license fee that is, of $500 on the town's whiskey merchants. This was probably due to too many people selling liquor from wherever and public drunkenness becoming a major problem. The high license fee was designed to weed out just anyone from dispensing drink and limit it to more reputable and respectful individuals. By 1900, the town council took further action to regulate saloon dealers. They kept the high license fee and imposed more restrictions, which passed by a vote of 5 to 4 after a passionate argument on both sides. These include the restrictions, that is. The liquor license may be issued for the year beginning May 1st, 1900 on the following conditions. Number 1, the fee for liquor license shall be $500. Number 2, barrooms shall not open at all on Sunday, nor before daylight, nor close later than 9 p.m. Other days, except on Saturday night, when the closing hour shall be 10:30 p.m. Number 3, all persons shall be excluded at the closing hour nor admitted except at prescribed hours under penalty of $5 for each offense. Number 4, no screen, blinds, painted windows, curtains, or other devices or obstruction shall be allowed which would obscure the view from the street of anyone inside any bar room of the town under a penalty of not less than $5 nor more than $20 for each offense. I'd like to add also that Farmville policemen were not allowed to go into any bar room except to do their job, to go get somebody. Number 5, billiards and pool tables and games of any character are forbidden in every room and in every adjoining apartment in which liquors are sold in this corporation under a penalty of $10 for each offense. Number 6, no rear side entrances to bar rooms shall admit customers or visitors to the proprietor under a penalty of $5 for each offense. Number 7, all drinking and selling in bar rooms shall be within 30 feet of the front entrance under penalty of $5 for each offense. Now, the town councilman, Mr. Wall, moved the adoption of the ordinance. Mr. Farrer seconded the motion. Mr. Bugg was the first to speak the motion. He characterized the ordinance as unjust, unfair, and without warrant of public sentiment favoring it. He believed where a license tax of $500 was imposed, it was paid only by respectable men, and he considered those who are now engaged in the sale of whiskey in Farmville, and if they are not respectable, no license should be granted them. He thought that this move was in the spirit of prohibition, and a vote having but recently been taken on the subject of whiskey selling to adopt the ordinance would be unfaithful to voters and contrary to the wishes of a majority of our citizens. Mr. Bugg offered strong argument against the adoption of the measure, concluding with the remark that there were many more crimes than the selling of whiskey, as for instance the mercilessly grinding of widows and orphans, as some people of his acquaintance were guilty of. I'm not sure what he means by that. Do you know grinding of widows out of price gouging or something like that? I'm just not sure. Mr. Morris did not favor the measure because of the injustice it would be to the proprietors of saloons. I have Dr. Anderson, he's my favorite. Dr. Anderson thought it decidedly unjust to say a man shall not do business in any part of his own house he wishes to. He could see no good, no justice, no object to be obtained, nor the practicability in the passage of such an ordinance. Mr. Gillum was the only gentleman present who addressed the council favoring the ordinance. The object, he said, was to save our boys. He knew it would keep out of the bar rooms a large number who now frequent them. I'm not sure how. It's just going to cut down the number of bar rooms, it sounds like. He believed the council had the right to place these restrictions, and on the other hand, the whiskey seller also has the right not to apply for the license. Wow. The Farmville Dispensary. By 1901, Senator Asa Dickinson Watkins, Prince Edward, offered a bill in the state Senate permitting the establishment of a liquor dispensary in Farmville. The bill's passage resulted in the closing of all saloons in Farmville, effective April 29, 1901. The town council met and elected Dr. Peter Winston, Dr. R.M. Bidgood, and W.T. Clark as the first board of managers for the dispensary. They all had like staggered terms, 1 year, 2 years, and 3 years. And here's an article, I guess it's Black Saturday, the first Saturday in Farmville history that no liquor was sold, legally at least. Last Saturday was, we presume, the first dry Saturday in the history of Farmville. Judge Hundley had not yet given his decision in the dispensary question. No licenses had been granted, and of course the saloon doors were all closed. The May sun shone out resplendently, and the air was almost tonic enough to do without the cocktail. And yet some folks did look lamentably thirsty. A case in point, Winder, has been coming to town every day for more than a quarter of a century with much less than a quarter of wood for sale. And on being asked last Saturday what he thought of a dry town, he said, "It is dreadful, sir, and this here place is going to be dreadful dull if this here thing continues. Folks will have their dram and they is going to go where it is." Wander's right. Wander spoke feelingly and evidently from a dry stomach. On a closed door of one of the saloons was a notice of a reward of $50 for a lost dispensary, because it hadn't opened yet. Numbers read it, and some of the number looked as though they would have given the reward just to have been admitted inside. The crowd in town was as large as usual on Saturdays, though this is an unusually busy season with the farmers. One overdrenched individual was seen to stagger down an alleyway, but no one saw him buy a drap. And the inference is that he brought it with him from the Cumberland side. Quiet reigned on Main Street, even friendly greetings being given and received in subdued tones. But Farmville was never a fussy place, and our hope is it will never be, wet or dry. Before the dispensary opened, liquor dealers Joseph Manoni, Hugh O'Gara, C.H. Bliss, and C.W. Blanton, don't know a thing about it, with their attorney, W.C. Franklin, fought the establishment of the dispensary by reapplying for licenses to sell liquor. They were denied because of the Dispensary Act, but Judge George J. Hundley of the Circuit Court heard their motion. He rendered a very lengthy decision declaring the Dispensary Act unconstitutional. The state Supreme Court overturned Judge Hundley's decision, the 1901 Act, saying that the 1901 Act permitted but did not require the town council to open a dispensary. Appeals leading to the state Supreme Court decision delayed opening of the farm dispensary for at least another 2 years. On April 14, my feeling is Judge Hundley was probably a drinking man. Can anybody back me up on that?
Yeah, I think so.
You think so?
There's a Hundley liquor bottle in Richmond. Did you know that?
There's a
Hundley liquor bottle in Richmond.
interesting.
Yes. Now, how you figure that?
What? That he was a drinking man?
Yeah.
Because I think it was because he wanted saloons open. Well,
you're right.
We'll get to it in a little bit, and he's going to do another action, which makes me think, yeah,
Absolutely.
he must have been a drinking man. All right. It doesn't seem like he wants the dispensary because he thinks that's going to be threatening his liquor from his saloons.
Right.
And in a little bit, we'll see something else he does. On April 14, 1903, a resolution was passed by town council declaring, because this was really a sticky thing in town, and everybody's trying not to upset everybody over this, and apparently they're letting democracy reign. In view of the fact that businessmen and citizens generally of the town have different views and opinions in regard to the advisability in opening a dispensary in the town, be it resolved that the town council of Farmville hereby refuses to open a dispensary in the town until a majority of the registered voters of the town express themselves as in favor of it. A referendum was held on December 22, 1903, to decide between saloons and the dispensary. Of the 324 votes cast, 187 were for the dispensary and 128 against. 9 votes were invalidated. A new managing board was elected, consisting of W.T. Clark, our friend J.L. Richardson, who was the liquor buyer for the whole period, and G.M. Robeson. Remember, he's the guy who started Farmville Manufacturing, Farmville Creamery. He was a wheel. He was into everything, it seemed. The council instructed the board to open the dispensary as soon as possible and appropriated $2,000 for the purpose. The dispensary opened January 14, 1904, in the building that now houses Greenfront Furniture. I'm sure he's asking which one of the main building, right on the corner there. A crowd witnessed the opening, and $16 worth of sales occurred in the first 45 minutes. To me, that doesn't sound like very much, really. I think that people are kind of leery and don't want to see you going in there and that kind of thing, but they lose their inhibition later on. Of the profits to be derived, 1/4 went to the state, 3/8 to the town for roads, and 3/8 for schools. In the first 6 months of operation, the dispensary declared a profit of $5,710.01. By 1906, the dispensary was averaging over $200 a day, and gross sales amounted to more than $48,365. Printed in the Farmville Herald periodically is a report of the Farmville Dispensary. It was kind of like public record, and all this was being made public as to how much they sold and what they spent on what. And this gives us a lot of clues also about bottles and things and just the basic operation. This comes from the July 31st, 1908 issue of the Herald. And it says that to whiskey invoices this is for the first 6 months of that fiscal year. $19,628 they spent in whiskey. In beer, they spent $2,235. Salary account for the bartenders and all, I guess, $1,032. Freight and expense, $644. Rent of the dispensary, $175. To insurance, $35. Corks, $124.24. That's a lot of corks, I would think.
Yeah.
To bottles, $2,146. If you can find out about how much a bottle costs, we could use this figures, add them up, and you can figure out about how many bottles they bought. So you can figure out how many bottles are out there. Here's a one I like, 2 jugs, $335. I've never seen a Farmville dispensary crock jug. Anybody?
No.
Oh, I've pulled in the bottles 25 years, and it seems to me I would have at least seen a piece of part of one in the river or something. Now, I have seen a Farmville dispensary crock jug, but I really question its authenticity. And given that it came out of a crowd who are excellent potters and fixed pottery, and I don't believe it was real.
He said he has a friend that he works with, said he has one.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Black lettered or stamped, or
He didn't exactly say how it was fixed.
Gary Love said he had.
might have had a big label on it.
May have had a label.
I'm thinking they probably just used plain jugs. By this time period, 1908, about the turn of the century, they're getting away from this type of salt glazing and getting into your white, like your moonshine jug, your white tan, white on the bottom and the brown on the top. Around the turn of the century, your jugs kind of turn mainly into that look. To cash registers, $527, great deal. To printing, $82. Ice, $93. Coal, $15. Water, rent, I guess that's for town water, would be $15. To telephone, they have a telephone in the dispensary, $7.50. And here's the nice one, this is a good clue. Bottle washer. These bottles were not meant to be throwaway. They were meant to be returnables. And you were supposed to bring them back and get them refilled. Because I have seen them with label, over top of label, over top of label. They were returnable bottles.
That makes sense. Why make new ones? Why have to buy new ones?
Yeah, most definitely. They're too expensive to make to begin with, to just let them go with them. All right. J.B. Wall related in a story. We all remember J.B. I believe it was published in 1979. It was an article, I think a fellow by the name of Apgar sent a picture of a dispensary bottle to the Herald and just wanted to know a little something about it. And J.B. did an editorial on the Farmville dispensary and how the half pints were known as the tickler, because it was just enough kind of give you a little tickle without kind of getting you just, passed out drunk. And he said in the article that as a young boy, he would collect ticklers from back alleys, tobacco warehouses, especially in the horse stalls during the tobacco selling season, and every Saturday for that matter, as most farmers would come to town on Saturday and park their horses and buggies at the warehouses. Empty ticklers were abundant. He also related a story about an old Negro named Uncle Glory, who walked with one crutch, carried a basket containing bags of peanuts on his head, and would make his rounds to trade ticklers for peanuts. He then probably sold them back to the dispensary as the bottles were used as a returnable vessel. We ate the peanuts, he said. J.B. An attempt to close the Farmville dispensary happened in 1914 when the legislature approved an act providing for yet another referendum by the citizens of Prince Edward County on the question of closing the dispensary. And now they got it down to each of the different localities, of which only Farmville passed it that they wanted, and the Leaf District down in Meharron. These 3 bottles are from Meharron dispensaries. They also said they wanted to sell liquor. Judge Hundley, back to our old buddy George here, who earlier found the Dispensary Act unconstitutional, denied an appeal or petition for an election on its repeal. Efforts to save the dispensary, however, proved futile. However, as Virginians voted for statewide prohibition on September 22, 1914, the prohibition took effect May 1, 1916, and on the last day it was opened, April 29, 1916, the Farmville Dispensary had receipts of $1,324. The best I'd seen for any day before that time was $544, which was just phenomenal considered at that point. Some rules governing the Farmville Dispensary. I thought these were very interesting. The dispensary shall open at sunrise and close at sunset, and shall open on a principal street and have none but front doors. I'm sure the fire marshal was elated about that, but obviously keeps the liquor from going out the back door. The dispensary board shall fix prices, but no profit above 80% will be allowed. Nothing sold except in sealed packages, and no unbroken packages can be kept in the place. This is important, because that shows you that you didn't have a table, you couldn't just sit there and drink your liquor. It was one of that ABC on-off kind of thing. You had to take it off premises in order to consume it. The smallest package must contain not less than a half pint, tickler, and the largest not more than 4 gallons. So we know they had 4-gallon crock jugs. A monthly report must be made to the dispensary board and rigid examination of stock made by a competent chemist. No goods to be sold for resale, and none to habitual drunkards or minors, except on a physician's prescription. No loitering allowed, and no drinking allowed within 10 feet of the dispensary. Although there was an article I read about how somebody wrote in and said, well, you know, they need to increase this 10 feet to a much greater distance because people had a tendency to just go out right into the street, up, tickler, and that was it. So apparently it just didn't look very good. No curtains or blinds that may obstruct an interior view from outside. Clubhouses are prohibited from handling liquors. The profits shall go 1/4 to the state, 3/8 to the town of Farmville for schools, and 3/8 to the Farmville Magisterial District for public roads. An article from March 5th, 1909, issue of the Herald, compared the revenue generated from dispensaries around the state, and Farmville was second only to Abingdon's dispensary in receipts paid to the state. Other dispensaries in Virginia included the Municipal Dispensary in Boyden, Cortland down in Southampton, Emporia Dispensary, the Lee District Dispensary in Maharon, Franklin Dispensary, Franklin the town, I'm sure not the county, they ain't worried about that dispensary. Martinsville Dispensary, Pulaski Dispensary, Ridgeway down by Martinsville, the Scottsville Dispensary, Virginia Dispensary in Virgilina, and the Waverly Dispensary. Ladies and gentlemen, that's about it. I didn't want to get too much into temperance because we could go on and on forever about it. Really, I was running out of time on my notes. But there was a fellow here, the first temperance society in the state of Virginia and in the South in general was formed here in Southside Virginia in Keysville, down at Ash Camp Baptist. Well, that was before it became a Baptist church, but Ash Camp. And it was started by a fellow named Elmer Klupper, I think, Klupton or something like that. But we had the Women's Christian Temperance Union here. And Ms. Taylor brought this in right here with some pins. This is from Longwood, the Red Cross, and that this white ribbon pin is what the women would wear to urge people, you know, symbolize that they are temperate individuals, and urge you also not to drink. Would anybody like to talk about the temperance people? Do you know anything about it? Anything in particular you want to say? Well, when it comes to collecting old bottles, I'm into it. I guess you can tell. I've got some bottles here you're welcome to look at. There are some papers as well. That billhead right there is from John Beale. He was a liquor dealer in town. It's dated like 1889. I got the feeling, I don't see any ads for him in the Herald, so I got the feeling the $500 license fee probably drove him out. He didn't renew. The Farmville Dispensary, when you look at them, they all look the same until you look at them. You'll see that there's 5 different styles of embossing with slight minor variants involved. Of course, I'm insane. I got to try and say one of each one of them. But I kind of got them laid out here up front. There's 6 of them there, but 2 of them are kind of very, very similar. But this is basically your 5 different styles along with your half pints. The quarts tend to be rather difficult to find because first you don't see, they cost more. There weren't as many of them made, and they tend to break so much easier. These things tend to be very light bulb thin up in the shoulders. And I was going to buy one from Miss Dowdy down here at Dowdy Furniture. She had a little antique thing going for a while, and she had one. She was going to sell me one for $15, and I L. Lazarus from Lynchburg for $20. So she went and picked them up together, thanked them, bought the dispensary broke, just like that. Well, I'll take the last brought it because it's just so rare to see a picture of anything liquor-related, interior of a bar, anything like that here in Southside Virginia. So I just brought that for you to look at as well. That's probably what the interior of our saloons here in town look like as well. Any questions? Yes?
Where did the liquor come from that went into these dispensary bottles?
They would buy them from liquor clearinghouses and warehouses, and then they would dispense them from barrels or larger vessels, just about any place really.
Was it Brand X? Was it
They would be.
whatever they could get?
Generally, they would be reputable brands from major distillers and all who would sell the liquor. And I don't know, people, they were into it. They could tell bogus liquor and all. And a lot of times try to cut it with a little bit of water. Some put 1 ounce in every pint or something like that. It just depends on who you're dealing with. They suppose they had tax stamps over the corks to seal them to keep that from happening once they've been filled. But they're major brands brought in probably in barrels, and then they would be dispensed into the smaller serving bottles.
Mix some with moonshine.
Maybe so. Or maybe something brought out of the country.
Gotta pay extra for that.
Yeah.
Anything else? Yes.
They were just talking about different brands and different types. Do they have other labels on the bottles then to tell you what was in there?
Right. Yes, ma'am. Generally, they put the brand for whatever it was. And they had basic labels like this, which were generic, just a round label. And this one is stamped on it, blackberry brandy, and then a price.
But I mean, on these other bottles, which have embossed, did they have a paper label or something on the back?
Yes, yeah, they would have paper labels. They've just come off over time from being outside and things like that. If they got a paper label on it, you know it's been inside. It's just not going to survive outside. Yeah. I would love to see paper labels on the dealers themselves. I think that would. And shot glasses. There's got to be acid shot glasses. That was just a complimentary thing that they would have. Never seen anything like that for Farmville. Tip trays, beer trays, things like that. I've never seen anything like that for Farmville, but they must have existed. Yes, sir.
I have heard Mr. Osmond's father preach at Osmond preached a number of times back in the late 30s and 40s on the topic of strong drink. And he'd close his eyes and shake his finger and say, wine is a mark of strong drinkers raging, and whoever is deceived thereby is not wise.
Well.
Say it slowly,
Anyone else, Jimmy?
Yeah. How about O'Brien and O'Brien?
Oh, good question. Glad you asked that. I don't see anything about it. Now, this F.G. Byrne, who was with O'Gara, I mean, that seems to be real close for O'Byrne and then Byrne. But I don't know anything about them. Don't see any ads for them. All I saw was that in 1905, after they closed the saloons, they had this big liquor license fee, and they didn't have their entire year, and they're applying to get their money back. And it's like 4 years later before they actually give them a prorated share of their licenses back. And O'Byrne, this was in a Bradshaw, and it lists O'Byrne and O'Byrne for getting part of their liquor license fee back. But I don't see anything about. Usually, the O'Byrne and O'Byrne flask, that's this one right here. Usually, the hardest one it seems to find will be the O'Byrne and O'Byrne.
Really?
Usually, if you find one, it's going to be one of the other 3 dealers before O'Byrne and O'Byrne.
Is the quart real rare?
Yeah, quart's rare. It exists because I have some.
I have one.
All right, that's good.
Oh, yeah, I got it.
That's good. Anybody else?
Yeah. What year did the ABC take over?
ABC took over. I think they applied. All right, Prohibition was repealed in 1932. This is a petition here for the temperate people wanting the 18th Amendment to stay, to not be repealed. Not the 18th Amendment. What was it, the 14th?
18th Amendment.
Was it the 18th? I thought the 18th was, no, that's the 18th. I thought the 18th was for the 18-year-olds to vote. That's right, it's the 18th Amendment. That's a petition here, so it was in the Roosevelt administration. This is dated November 4, 32, so I guess in 33, Prohibition must have been rescinded. I believe in 34, the town put into the state to have an ABC store brought here in town. Where was the first ABC store in town located?
Located on what used to be the People's Bank. I believe the next door or one door below that.
Correct. Did it move anywhere? Did it move anywhere between there and going to the Farmville Shopping Center? Anybody else? I think Farmville Shopping Center's been there just about the whole time Farmville Shopping Center's been here.
Yeah, they moved in with us.
They've been a good tenant, I guess. Anyone else?
Billy, when I was in college in the 50s, we couldn't go downtown until after 2 o'clock on Saturdays because the ABC store was open. And it was that, you know, Count Pickett was fading out at that time, but the two combined kept Dean Lee's kept us on campus after 2 o'clock on Saturdays.
They didn't open then till 2?
No, they closed at 2.
And closed at 2, okay, so they couldn't go down until after.
Quote, the riffraff had gone by that time.
And you could go down.
That's what we were told.
And then you could go down.
Then we could go down, it was after 2 o'clock. As freshmen, then the older students.
Well, does the name James Cannon Jr. ring any bells? Any Methodists?
James Cannon Jr., he was the head of the drive for prohibition in Virginia, and he was president of Blackstone Women's College.
Right. And he was a minister here in Farmville for a while.
Yeah.
And so he was big into prohibition.
Dr. James something Cannon.
James Cannon, I don't know what his middle initial was. I think it was Jr. James Cannon Jr. Alrighty. Any other questions? Ladies and gentlemen, you're welcome to look at my bottles. Please make sure that they stay here. And I thank you very much for coming out tonight. I hope you enjoyed it just half as much as I did.
Does anybody know where the building was? I'd like to know. Behind HP Ball and when they had a forum under them.
Yeah, that was at J.L. Richardson we were talking about.
Yeah, but where was the building?
It's me.
You know
It just
that.
says it was in the rear of it. I'd like to know.
Mr. Allen, my father, he wanted to know if you knew where first fall was at. Robert wanted to know if you knew.
See, the Richardson store was on Ian Collins, where the antique shop is next.
Yeah, Susan's it.
And Morton home was next door where you were talking about prior to that. That's where Judy stayed with the Morton after he left the job. I'm not too sure, but it sounds like to me the Richardson store has always been on Conway.
I think that was another Richardson. I'm sure they
That's George Richardson.
George Richardson, exactly.
Right? Yeah.
James Richardson, somewhere behind Baldwin. But the fire, the wind blowing from the south, I don't know anything to say that whole thing.
That used to be a big, where Bottom's is now, big, long, some of us out there.
Frankly, it doesn't have a lip on it.